It's time for an arcade build video. Let's get on with it. Roll titles! Welcome to the channel if it's your first time here, and welcome back if it's not. Now this is part 5 of the arcade machine build project. If you've missed the previous parts of our arcade build, then where the hell have you been? Make sure you go back and watch them so you can get fully up to speed, because a lot has happened in all these videos so far. And this one should be no exception. We're looking at something that is so fundamentally important of the arcade machine, and it's this. It is the wiring. Now this is a JAMMA wiring harness, and this was purchased by Wayne Cornish. So thank you, Wayne. So what's so important about this? Well, pretty much everything that the arcade machine does will go through these wires. Essentially, the arcade machine board plugs into this connector here, and all the signals and wiring and stuff gets sent around the cabinet. Now, as you can see here, I've actually added this little label that I got from something like Arcade Art Shop, and it tells you what all these connectors are. So you've got the parts side here, and then you've got the solder side here. So when you plug the board in, the parts side is where all the chips and ICs are, and the solder side is the bottom of the board where all the solder is. And as you can see, we've got up here, we've got the power, we've got ground, we've got 5 volts, we've got 12 volts, and then we've got the speaker connections here. And then down here, we've got the video connections. We've got the test switch, the coin switch, and then we've got all the connections for player 1. And if we switch it over, more of the same on the other side, different connectors. And then on this side here, we've got all the player 2 controls. Now, what I thought I would do in this video is go through what all these connectors are going to be plugging into, and talking a bit more about how I'm going to be wiring up the arcade cabinet. Now, I know it doesn't sound very thrilling, and I know you want to just see the arcade machine built and all ready and looking amazing, but the thing is, without this wiring, it won't work, and we've got to get it sorted and organized and sort of plan ahead and think about how everything is going to work. So it is a bit dull, but it's going to be worth it, and hopefully you might get a little bit more understanding of how the wiring works, so when I do put it in the cabinet, you know what's going on. So I think what we're going to do is we need to basically label up these wires and work out what does what. So we'll start here, because I know what this is. These are the power connectors. So yellow is our 12 volt, red is our 5 volt, and black is our ground. And when they're in the arcade machine themselves, they'll plug into this. And I can't remember who bought me this. I put a community post out there because the people who bought me things from Amazon, I didn't get delivery notes or details of who sent me what. So if you bought me this, please do get in touch with me on my email address so I can thank you properly. And if you got in touch in time, then I'll put your name down there. But yeah, this is the arcade machine power supply. So we've got our AC in, so that's our line and neutral going in. Then we've got our ground going in. And then coming out of it, we've got our plus 5 volts, we've got our ground, and we've got our 12 volts. And there's a little dial there that you can adjust and fine tune the voltages coming out of it. So we'll have to make sure the voltages are bang on before we plug anything into this. This will sit in the bottom of the arcade cabinet, providing the voltage to our arcade boards. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to print labels as we go so I can cable manage a little bit better. We need to put a label on it, which I've already printed. And I will show you the label printer in a moment because it is extraordinary and I love it. So let's get that on there. There we go. So we know this is going down to our PSU. Now I think I'm pretty certain what this is, because we talked about this a bit in the Atari RGB mod, because we've got some RGB there, and this is our video output from the arcade machine board. So this normally would plug into a CRT monitor, which is a cathode ray tube monitor, and output a video signal. But we're not using a cathode ray tube monitor because they're big, they're old, and they're heavy, and they are actually quite expensive. We're using an LCD screen, a bit like the ones behind me, in the cabinet. Now, we can't just feed these signals straight into an LCD screen because they're not at the right resolution or refresh rate that one of those would understand. So we need a board that will convert this old school EGA or CGA signal from the arcade board into something our modern screen will understand. And that's why we've got this. And this is a video encoder board. So it has power, which is handily provided on this connector here, and it takes in the video here, so that will plug in something like that, and it outputs it into a nice clean VGA signal. And it does have these little switches on here so you can like navigate the menus and stuff, because I think you can turn scan lines on and things, so it looks like an old arcade machine. These connections are all for our monitor, so that's fine. We can make a label for the monitor. So yeah, this is a Nimbot D110, I think. I'll put a link to it in the description, and it's my label printer. I'll make it so you can see my screen up here, and I'll show you how it works. So as you can see at the moment, we've got the PSU label that I printed. So we need to change that to monitor. And the amazing thing about this printer is when you put the labels in, you have to buy the special labels suitable for it, but it actually has a little chip in the spool of labels that tells the machine what type of label you've got. So the software knows what you can print and how much space you've got and everything. So I've got these cable tie labels, so it should print absolutely perfectly. Isn't that smart? And obviously you can get labels of different lengths and types, and you can get clear ones, you can get color ones, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I definitely recommend getting one of these label makers because they are so good. Just wrap a little cable tie thing around there. Squish the label down. And we know these ones are for our monitor. Because obviously if you think about it, there's going to be lots of different parts of the machine that cables are going to shoot up to. So on the mid part of the machine, we've got our controls for player 1 and player 2. Right at the bottom of the machine, we've got the power supply. Right at the top, we've got the speakers. So yeah, we've got to really think about how we're going to organize the wiring. I want to make it look as neat as possible. I really want to do a fantastic job on this. And that's why I'm sort of making a video dedicated to this, because you've got to think through everything as you go. Right, so what other bits do we have? Okay. I think this is for the coin mechanism. The way a coin switch works in an arcade machine is it is essentially a switch. If the coin passes through and the coin is the correct type of coin, the switch is triggered and it sends a signal to the arcade board to say coin has been inserted, add however many credits. Because things have moved on a little bit, we've actually got quite a modern coin acceptor that's going into this machine. And the principle is essentially the same. The correct coin goes through it and it credits the amount. But this can actually learn different types of coin, and it requires programming and stuff like that. I'm going to do a video on it, but I think it will need like a whole entire video because it's just very complicated. But I'm pretty certain this plugs into that. Have to check the pin configuration. You see you've got 12 volt coin, ground and counter, because like back in the day, you could get electromagnetical counters that would count the coins as they go in. So you could find out if someone was diddling you. You could see the amount of coins that pass through the machine by the counter, and obviously in the cash collection box, you could see the amount of coins. But yes, the principle is the same. The coin goes in. If it's the correct kind of coin, it goes out of the bottom and into the cash box. And if it's the wrong type of coin, it comes out of the rejection slot. But yeah, there's so many little switches and stuff here where you have to use to program it. So if you want to program it to use a pound coin, you've got to pass 20 pound coins through here so it learns them and the weight and all the composition of them. So yeah, this is going to require a separate video, probably nearer the end, about how to configure this, because I really don't have any idea. I think this connector here is for our coin mechanism, and these ones here, I believe, if I look at the colours, yep, so it's a test switch and a service switch. So a test switch could put the game into a test routine to make sure that it's working correctly as it should, and a service switch might be used for, say, setting the difficulty of a game or saying how many credits one coin should give you. Yeah, we'll need to wire those separately, and usually the service and test buttons are sort of tucked away in the coin door, so they're not accessible by the members of the public, because otherwise they could maybe even set the cabinet into free play, which we don't want people playing my games for free. Right, so let's make some labels quickly. Now, something I really need to consider as well when it comes to the arcade machine is the overall power. Now, at the moment, the power will just go into the back of the machine and the machine will be on and working. And I don't really want to have to reach around the back or pull out the machine to switch things on and off. It would be really handy to have a switch maybe slightly out of sight where I can just power on the arcade machine. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put a switch at the top of the machine, maybe right at the very top of the machine, so it's not completely visible, but I can just reach to that and turn the machine on and everything powers up. But obviously, as well as powering the arcade board, we have to think about more power for other things. So for example, we're going to have a monitor in there, so I need to run some mains voltage to that. And then at the top of the machine, we're going to have the marquee, and that is the sign that basically says the game. And commonly, back in the day, those were lit up by fluorescent tubes. I'm not going to use a fluorescent tube because they get very hot and they're not very energy efficient. So I might have an LED fluorescent tube, or I might even put some hue light strips in there as a way of lighting the top of the machine. But yeah, I've got to think about the most sensible way of powering everything, because it's not just about the board. And also, if I add a Raspberry Pi in there, that will need power as well. But we'll talk about that a bit more in a mo. Right, so we're making good progress with working out what everything is. I'm feeling quite happy now, because it is very daunting to see all of these wires and things and not really know what they are. Now, back in the day when I used to do arcade collecting, if you wanted a JAMMA harness like this, you'd probably have to build it yourself. So you'd have to buy one of these connectors and solder on every single wire. So it's super convenient. We've got a connector and a harness we've already done for us, and it's even got all the little spade connectors on, which will make life a lot easier. Right, got this little bundle of joy here. I think this is the 2-player controls, because we've got another bundle here that's massive and that's got all the grounds on it. So I think maybe that's 1 player and all the grounds for both 1 player and 2 player, maybe. I'm also going to go across all of these sort of bundles that I've made with a cable tie and cable tie them together properly. It's just a mess, and if I dropped this on the floor, well, it would be disaster. Right, let's just double check that we are actually talking about the player 2 connections. So I'm going to stick my probe on green and go to the green on here on player 2, which is player 2 right. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, this is getting into a bit of a mess already. Make a label that says player 2. Yeah, so you might remember from my previous video where I explained about the JAMMA standard. JAMMA stands for the Japanese Arcade Machine Manufacturers Association, and it was brought in because basically when arcade machines first came out, like each different manufacturer had their own sort of connectors and power supply voltages and all that kind of stuff. And the JAMMA harness thing was basically just a standardization across all of those different types of machine. So it meant that you didn't need a specific cabinet to run a game. So for example, if Beat 'em Up #1 came out and that had its own arcade board, the arcade operator would put the board in the machine and plug it into the JAMMA connector, and that was great. But then if Fighting Game 2 came out and like there was a new one, it would mean that the arcade operator didn't have to buy a brand new cabinet. He could literally just take out the original board, slam in the new one, and it would just work. So yeah, the JAMMA connector is amazing and still stands the test of time. There are variations of it because there used to be things such as 3 or 4 player games, and obviously you don't have connectors for those. Or there were games with 6 buttons like Street Fighter 2, and that required an additional harness. I'm not sure what I'm going to do about the additional buttons yet, because this seems to have support for up to 5 buttons, not 6. Yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Here are our player 1 controls, and all these grounds loop between our player 1 controls and go to our player 2 controls and our start buttons and things like that. But we've got these guys here and I don't really know what they are. Well, no, that's not completely true. So we've got these 2 white wires which go to our speaker, so that makes perfect sense. But we've got these additional wires here which are grey and green. And I don't know what they are. So yeah, we'll have to run down with the multimeter and work out what on earth they're connected to. Right, so let's do the grey. Oh, okay, look, so we've got, a bit hard to see, but on 2 player 4 there, we've got a white wire and a grey wire. I don't know why you'd have that. So what's this green wire then? What does that go to? Is that another coin? That's weird. We've got a secondary player 2 button 4 and a secondary coin. I can imagine the point of having a secondary coin because I might actually use that. That could be helpful to start with when I haven't wired up the coin door, because you could just put a coin button on the arcade control panel. But having a separate player 2 button 4 seems very odd. I don't understand that. Right, well, I'm not going to like snip it off or anything. I think I'll just kind of keep it out of the way. So we can label these up as just the player 1 controls and the grounds, and they can all just go together in one bundle for now. Obviously you remember that I mentioned right at the start of the project that I was going to put a Raspberry Pi running emulation in the cabinet, and I'm going to do that, but I think I'm going to do it in a slightly different way than I had planned. You can get an adapter that is a Raspberry Pi to JAMMA connector, and it's an add-on board that goes onto the Raspberry Pi and adds a JAMMA connection to it, and it just plugs straight into this connector here. And it's almost like having an arcade board that's a Raspberry Pi. It is mad. So I think I'm going to use one of those simply because I want this to be an arcade cabinet first and sort of a retro gaming emulation machine second. Yeah, I want to try and keep it as faithful as possible. I know I'm not using a CRT monitor, but it would be really cool just to buy some arcade boards and just plug them in and play them as they were intended, rather than just using it solely for emulation. You might think it is really sort of quite daft spending all this time and indeed a video working out this cabling, and in some ways it is a bit daft, but equally I want to get this right first time. I don't want to put a load of cables in and then go, oh no, I've forgotten this or that. I want to make sure it's all clear in my head and I've got a plan and maybe a wiring diagram, so I've got it absolutely spot on. I'm pretty certain I've got everything now that needs to go into the machine to get it working. It's really exciting, but this needed doing because it's a mess. But yeah, trust me, the next part is going to get a lot more spicier, and I imagine we'll be back at the machine and actually doing things. We need to mount a switch in the top for the power. We need to mount a power input for the back. We need to even cut out a hole for the coin door, which is here actually. So yeah, there's so much to come, and not every video is going to be a stone cold banger, but hopefully you've got a bit more of an understanding about how the wiring in an arcade machine works and what we've got to contend with. So yeah, I'm going to sit off camera now and cable tie these bundles together just so it's a little tidier, and then it means I can start routing them around the machine. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. Please make sure you're subscribed and you get notifications, because I'll be wanging out another one of these videos before you know it. And if you've missed any other parts, then please go back and check them out. But yeah, I don't think I've got anything else to say, so thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, but for now, it's game over.